Well, thank you very much to all the panelists. I was just reminded that Carlos takes me back to my first job. I started with the Mexican Forest Service at in the National Forestry Development Program of the Mexican Forest Service, and worked with many of my contemporaries were people who Carlos worked with and when he started out his career. So let's shift a little bit to the biochar community. How do we move the biochar community forward? What role does the US Biochar Initiative play, and uh, how can we continue to do the good work of getting biochar implemented? As I described earlier, the US Biochar Initiative is a nonprofit organization devoted to promoting the production and use of biochar. We focus on networking, education, and demonstration. We started out with Gloria Flora as the first executive director, 2010, and we're focusing on North America, Canada, the United States, and Mexico. We've held 7 conferences, and several workshops and demonstrations. We've restarted a newsletter. Started a Biochar Learning Center. We have the directory and social media. So problems we're solving, what are we focused on? We're looking at healthy soil, nutrient waste management, climate resilience, clean water, and environment, all of which we've discussed this morning. You see our mission is promoting biochar in North America for sustainable food security, improved soil fertility, environment, and climate resilience. Our solutions are to fully engage the scientific, agriculture, and biomass communities to use safe, stable, sustainable biochar through collaboration to learn, educate, inform, demonstrate, and develop markets, policy incentives, and quality standards. So that's a big order. We have a large biochar and diverse biochar community. The resource managers, the farmers, the foresters, contractors, woodland owners, agencies, those people working with soils, and also those working in the built community, those working in the environmental side. We have independent biochar and charcoal producers. We tend to think of biochar as distinct from charcoal. It certainly is distinct from charcoal in that it's used for soil and not for fuel. However, we have a large community of biochar or charcoal production in the United States, and those charcoal producers can make biochars by modifying their production operation. They can make biochar quality materials. They're as much a part of the community as anyone else. The biomass energy industry, as I showed earlier today, has high carbon residues. They can also add biochar production to their facilities to make biochar. We've been making efforts to include the wood products and agricultural industries. Their use of biochars and boilers, biochar from boilers and gasifiers and sawmills is producing biochar that is used today. We have yet to expand much into food and agricultural processing, but I'm sure we will in the future. We have a large number of biochar brokers and reprocessors. These are people who don't necessarily produce biochar, but they're looking at biochar sources, providing quality assurance, and distributing biochar to appropriate uses and markets. We've made a concerted effort over the last couple of years to engage the construction and demolition recycling industry. They have large quantities of clean wood waste and other construction materials which can be used to convert into biochar. The organic recycling community with composting, for example, and anaerobic digestion has been looking at and has begun to embrace biochar, has begun to incorporate biochar in their products. We see a lot of interest from landscapers and arborists. We've also made a concerted effort, especially this year, to work with laboratories. We've been contacting laboratories who do the same or similar analyses as we need for biochar, looking at their capabilities and seeing how they can assist us. So we have a number of biochar producers around the country. This was from a survey a couple of years ago that Harry Groot from Dovetail and Associates will be discussing tomorrow. We identified about 135 to 150 producers and a capacity of producing about 100,000 tons of biochar per year. We know that our capacity is there. We don't know. We estimate that somewhere between 50 and 70,000 tons of biochar is used per year. You see concentrations on the West Coast. There's a desperate need for biochar production in the Northeast and the East Coast. We have large populations, large needs for biochar. but we don't necessarily have the production there. And as I mentioned, additionally, we have barbecue charcoal producers who are now producing 850,000 tons of charcoal, largely from waste materials that could be producing biochar. This is our team. We're all volunteers. Nobody gets paid in this organization. I'm the executive director, Heather Nobert. Our secretary is with the Nebraska Department of Forestry, created the Great Plains Biochar Initiative, has done great work in testing biochar for use in animal feed. Ron Larson, our treasurer, concentrates on climate change policy. Tim Chaffee, mechanical engineer, concentrates on fundraising and event promotion. Albert Bates, well known in biochar, helps us with social media, marketing, of course, is with the EcoVillage Network. Kristen Tripp, you just heard from the Agricultural Research Service. We're fortunate to have two USDA Agricultural Research Service scientists on board, Kristen at Corvallis and Isabel Lima in New Orleans. Experts in microbiology and crops and activated carbon. Kelpie Wilson, Wilson Biochar Associates. We showed a picture of her earlier demonstrating flame cap type kilns. Heads up our education committee. Kathleen Draper, pretty well known, chairs the International Biochar Initiative, concentrates on a lot of non-soil applications for biochar. Josiah Hunt, biochar producer, Pacific Biochar, very active, one of the first producers in the United States who can now sell biochar on the European market. Chuck Hegberg, a civil engineer, concentrates on environment policy, works for Ecotone, and specifies biochar in a number of applications for stormwater environmental activities. And Carol Ribley, who works in communications, is now helping us get the word out. And in addition to the board members, we have a number of people in different agencies and organizations who've been supporting our work. Our accomplishments from 2000 to 2009 to 2020 include, like as I mentioned, a number of conferences, education, outreach, and demonstration, number of workshops. Policy activities. We worked with the University of California, Davis to recommend the use of biochar policies for their state soil health program. We'd like to do that with other states. We're involved in a biochar policy task force. Communications, again, I mentioned that we're beefing up our communications, our laboratory qualification, and we're developing a biochar market strategy. This is a long list, which will appear pretty small. Pretty small on your screen, but it's just simply the number of workshops and activities that we have done this year, at least some of them. We respond to about 3 to 5 calls a week from users, suppliers, NGOs, and government to provide technical support, marketing support, various kinds. So our goals for the coming year, biochar production and use. We have 100,000 tons a year capacity. Let's use it. Let's get that 100,000 tons out there in use. We'd like to see better specification of biochar grades and uses. As Kristen described in her presentation, there are different qualities of biochars. We want to match the qualities of biochars to the uses and also agree on some standard methods of analysis. We want to find ways to reduce production costs. We want to work towards a biochar industry association that can support a lot of this good work and expansion. In terms of biochar markets, education, demonstration, we want to support biochar users through communications, technical support, and conferences. We're creating an industry directory, which we have online to help connect users and suppliers. We want to research and demonstrate uses and develop best management practices, examples and instructions, specifications for use of biochar in different applications. We want to continue developing strategic alliances with the different agencies, organizations, professional organizations, and industry organizations that I mentioned before. We also want to work, as we talked this morning, on policy. We want to enable biochar for feed. The United States is the only place where one state, California, approves the use of biochar for feed, and there are 2 biochar products that are used there. We also want to see more incentive programs like the ones described In the earlier session, we're working on developing a carbon protocol so that we can take advantage of the larger markets for biochar internationally. So our plan: continue education and outreach, work on state and federal policy, create and update standards, create database of testing labs, organize more online business meetings, increase funding to meet the needs of industry, academia, and policy. And the needs, as Ron Alexander will describe in his presentation, we have some clear needs in building markets, in developing resources and standardization, and in developing our infrastructure, production, and technical support. And examples, for example, we have an evolving definitions, standards, certifications, and incentives. Brandon described the NRCS 808 earlier. We have some definitions of biochar that guide states and the way they define biochar. We need industry support and participation in developing these. We also need industry support in terms of developing the appropriate standards for appropriate uses. The International Biochar Initiative standards were developed for the use in soil for specific purposes, but we have a number of other uses of biochar and need to develop appropriate standards. So how can you help? Volunteer, sponsor, donate. We're an organization of volunteers that is now responding to a lot of demands, and you can see that we have a lot of challenges for moving forward.